When you think about combat mechanics in fighting games, you probably think of stuff like X Factor Level 3, Awakening in Persona, or V-Trigger, mechanics that are explicitly powered up the more the player is getting hit or losing. The intention of these is so that a player who's getting rolled has an easy way to fight back and make sure they're never out of the game. More recent fighting games don't actually really have as many explicit comeback mechanics, but this video is going to be about a more subtle case of it in Strive. The argument I'm making is that Strive's comeback mechanic is actually how much meter and burst you build for getting hit. You build meter when you get comboed in basically every fighting game, so what's the difference? Specifically in Guilty Gear games, you build less meter per hit in your combo the more scaled it is, and your opponent builds more meter and more burst per hit. So, to illustrate that, let me show the sequence. So, Pot actually ended up with like the same amount of meter I did, and look how much burst he has too. That's because if we play back this combo, you'll see that the early hits aren't actually that bad, but because I'm doing a really long combo for the corner carry and the meter, I'm actually building my opponent, more resources, because every hit that is later in the combo is of course going to be more scaled, which means not only is building me less meter, it's building him more. To compare, in Marvel, meter is tied to base damage, so regardless of how scaled a combo is, you and your opponent build the same amount of meter, which is most prevalent when you see like TAC infinites and stuff. But Street Fighter's meter is also not tied to scaling. In BlazBlue, your combo builds both you and your opponent less meter the more scaled it is, so it kind of balances out. In Dragon Ball, your meter doesn't get scaled down the longer the combo is, but your opponent's actually does, so it rewards you for doing longer combos rather than punishing you like Guilty Gear does. So in Guilty Gear, you actually kind of are uniquely punished for doing these longer combos since you're building less meter and your opponent is obviously building more resources. Resources are also especially strong in Guilty Gear. It isn't an exaggeration to say the game is about meter. Burst is of course strong because it lets you not get comboed, but for many characters, it also lets you start setting up your ideal win condition, like with Zato. Faust. Oh, perfect. It was Mini Faust on the first try recording this, by the way. Leave that in the video. Or, of course, Chaos. Not to mention Wild Assault, which can let a character consistently start offense from block normals when they'd otherwise struggle to, or convert when they otherwise couldn't. Testament is normally -4 on hit here, and can't combo into anything. If they're close, then they can do 5H, right? But from here, right? And then they're -7 on block, right? But with Wild Assault, they're allowed to just kind of do whatever. So for Testament, it might look something like this, into something like, I don't play Testament, right? Something like that.
Was about to get deadly once again, still working out, but the whip punish from Keishu and the Wild Assault to actually get the punish. Beautiful sequence.
Strive uses this system to discourage long combos, but many characters, including good ones, don't really have good ways to work around this and can't avoid building their opponent 50 or more meter per round, and even more burst than that, since you build an extra 1/6 of your burst upon getting wall stuck. You knew this was coming at some point. Let's talk about Potemkin and Goldlewis. Pot, along with having the most health in the game, spends meter far better than any other character in the game, and has the most threatening Wild Assault on block. Of course, he can pop us to RC and delete you, and if you do a combo to corner him, you might have just built him the meter to mash his 5-frame armor command grab and win the game off of it. But he also can use his meter instantly when neutral with Hammerfall, Red RC, and Garda. Hammerfall fast PRC, which builds him his meter back on hitting the Popbuster. He can just combo off of it because the animation of Popbuster is so long, it stalls out the meter penalty from the RC. Or Gigantic-Eye, a projectile that stays out on hit, which means blocking him is almost unavoidable unless you want to spend your own resources back. Because it doesn't go away until it reaches the other side of the screen and then lingers there for a while, or your opponent blocks 3 hits of it, which lets him just get Guard Crush Strike Throw. Pot's Far Slash, 2S, 6K, and most importantly 2D are all level 3, which means you can't press anything in the gap between these moves and Wild Assault. And he can even be out of throw range. Like that. Which means you can't jump or press anything in the gap, and you just have to, hope backdash works. Obviously he can charge the Wild Assault if he thinks you're going to backdash. But he has other ways of taking advantage of it, like doing Slide Head, or off of 6K, he can actually just beat it by doing Garda like that. If you block this Wild Assault, you're now forced into Guard Crush Strike Throw, either by him just doing Garda, or he could just do Hammerfall and then be +10 in your face like that, and then he just, no. So no matter what, you're forced into this terrible situation. Also, if you get hit by the Close Slash, you can't even burst the first couple hits because the Wild Assault just took away your burst, so you're actually forced to eat a pretty sizable amount of damage. You even might not be able to prevent a wall break, like this. So you just couldn't burst any of that. And that's Goldlewis taking that much damage, so whichever character you play is probably taking more.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, okay, great. Pot is broken, right? He's the best character in the game, we know this. Let's talk about Goldlewis now. Goldlewis has one of the strongest burst situations in the game with Drone, which only costs a security gauge. Because this gauge fills over time, him getting comboed can effectively stall for his own resource, and by the time he bursts, even if it's off the first of the match, he might already have Drone level 3. If you're able to push Goldlewis to the corner before he gets this drone, then once he does it, you can avoid interacting by letting him run you all the way to the other corner, which sounds bad, but is often the lesser of two evils when the other option is blocking Goldlewis. If you don't have the screen space, you have to either hit Goldlewis to get rid of the drone, somehow jump over it without getting anti-aired by a character with some of the best anti-airs in the game, like Jump S and 2P, or just block it. Some characters have specific options they can use to fight Drone, like Ram throwing a sword, Chaos by pulling steady aim and jumping, or even Zato by using Oppose, but at the end of the day, Drone is still a very strong situation that Goldlewis can force that is earned by him just losing and then bursting and then automatically doing it. So, okay, I forgot to record this part. Goldlewis also obviously does not have Blue Wild Assault, he has White Wild Assault, which can help him in neutral in a lot of matchups, like Happy Chaos or Bridget or something like that, where he doesn't want to play neutral. On top of being able to use RC, where at the range that Goldlewis will use White Wild Assault, your opponent is most likely walking back. So if you do White Wild Assault and then PRC, you can just fuzzy them off of it, and then just, you know, neutral skip, high-low 50 them. Obviously, it costs 50 burst and 50 meter, but it's a good thing that Goldlewis builds that for breathing. On top of that, he also has Burn It Down, which is like, oh, okay, Drone didn't win neutral hard enough for you, here's Burn It Down. It's probably not as free of a win as Gigantorkai. I mean, Gigantorkai is just stronger, but it still is kind of just an automatic, oh, I win neutral now, let me just run my offense now. Yes, there are answers around it. Yes, you can deflect it, whatever. Like, yeah, yes, Goldlewis players, I know, but come on, bro. This is all before even mentioning defense. Both of them have best-in-class YRC situations, so even if they lose neutral, they can just force their top-tier offense on you whenever they want. Super PRC, or RCing your super before the flash to invul through your opponent's attack, is also a strong option these characters both get access to, and they don't lose the meter if it's called out, which means they often can just do it again if it doesn't work. Meanwhile, a successful Super PRC into back throw or pop buster can win them the round on the spot. Building Potemkin and Goldlewis disgusting amounts of meter and burst is basically unavoidable due to their insane health pools, and because they can spend resources to do so much, how well they do in neutral can feel irrelevant, especially since they only really do need that one chance. Of course, every character would rather have meter and burst than not have it, but health aside, this uniquely benefits characters like Goldlewis and Potemkin since their combo routes are short and high damage, meaning they build their opponent significantly less meter. So I know this all sounds really bad, and I know I just said it's unavoidable like a million times, but we gotta do what we can, right? So let's talk about how to at least try to mitigate this. If you do shorter combos, you of course will build less meter and burst, and if you run wall damage, you can actually get some pretty big differences. Some characters like Soul, Slayer, and Pot all have moves that can just instantly, you know, wall stick or break in Pot's case, and they have it a little easier. So, for example, let's talk about the Soul combo. So, for example, the second combo I showed is more damage, but it builds your opponent a decent amount more meter. Off of more scaled hits, like 2K, it can be even more noticeable. So, it's a lot easier for Soul because he can just choose to do a combo. Like, I lost 17 damage, right? But in exchange for losing 17 damage, I built Pot like 20 less meter or something, right? If you want to see good examples of this, during my run at Taku, I intentionally did a lot of combos that ended earlier in order to build my opponent less resources. So I would do like RC into just like //HV or something like that, right? As opposed to doing like a whole drawn out, like get 8 clean hit Fafnir's type of combo, because it's just not as efficient in my eyes. But like I said, Soul has an easier time because he can very easily control his wall damage with HV. So he can just choose to stick here when many characters just can't, right? So for those other characters, I would recommend that you look at your wall damage numbers and intentionally just choose moves that have higher wall damage. Notably, Tap Dust is usually a character's highest wall damage move, and it can really make a bigger impact than you think. Let's say you're Ram and you hit a 2K2D in the corner, and the only thing you really want is just super wall break, right? And look how much meter that built Pot, right? I lost 6 damage, by doing the shorter combo as opposed to the longer one, and I built Pont a pretty noticeably smaller amount of meter, at least in my opinion. And this is just like one of many examples. Of course, 5D is basically every character's highest wall damage move, but pretty much every character's 6H and 6P are going to be really high wall damage. And then every character has a couple special moves as well that do high wall damage. So for Soul, Vortex, Bannerbringer, and Fafnir do high wall damage. For Ram, Daro does high wall damage. For Mei, Updolphin does a lot of wall damage, etc. I think this area of the game really can be pushed way further, and people probably aren't thinking about it right now as hard as they should be. So for example, let's look at these two Ram combos. Alright, 115 damage, builds him almost 50. So that combo did 5 less damage and built him like a decent amount less burst. And it's because I just chose to forego the Ender and then, you know, just do 5D. Obviously, that combo is actually pretty, like, spacing specific. So, you know, I will admit it's a bit of a cherry-picked example, but I think generally just applying the concept will go a long way. Another thing you might have caught is the move that I broke with, and that's the second part of what we can do better about this. Like I said, the meter the opponent builds is actually based off of, you know, how scaled the combo is, but what if the combo isn't scaled? Like, is everything going to build this much meter? And the answer is no. So my jab is going to build Pot this much meter. My 2 and 4H is going to build him this much meter. Which means the base damage of the move actually makes a difference. So what does that mean? The implication of that is that later in your combo, not only is doing high damage moves not as big of a difference because it's more scaled, but you are even further amplifying the amount of meter you're building them by doing these higher damage moves. Which is to say that if your combo is long, breaking with jab is optimal, right? That's a pretty easy conclusion to draw from it. You can see me do it as far back as December. I did it during my Talker run. Doing lower damage moves in your combos can also be more conducive to being burst safe. So, for example, let's look at this. Right? Because 5k is just hard to burst, right? So then maybe I'll just do another 5k after. Or maybe I'll just do 5d on the first one. So even if your opponent has burst, generally, you know, if your character has burst safe K normal, not all of them do, doing this type of stuff can be good. Obviously, Ram is super privileged in this area as well, but like I said, I'm cherry picking a little bit here to prove my point further. Even if we pretend that HVV doesn't exist, here's another example with Soul, because we know that Vortex is a high wall damage move. You could do something like versus doing something like in this example, you can see that my more meter-conscious, let's say, combo did a little bit less damage, but it built Pot a decent amount less burst and is also safer to his burst. And then the jab at the end obviously makes it, you know, build him even less resources. There's a time and place to go for these types of combos. I think it depends a lot on resources, and let's say if you want to go for a wall break just for your own resources and not because of, like, you know, super high damage or anything like that, it's probably correct to do this type of combo. Meanwhile, if it's like a really good hit, you might not want to give up as much damage or doing something that's like safer for your opponent's meter, as well as it being a good hit, probably meaning your combo is less skilled. So again, like, time and place for all this, but I think that there are a lot of spots where this really could be, you know, implemented better. That being said, I really don't want to have to optimize for Potemkin winning the game for losing, like, only a little bit later as opposed to the first interaction of the game. And I really still do think this needs to be tuned down. I'm happy about modern fighting games not having as many comeback mechanics, but Stride's resource game honestly feels almost as overbearing, and I really do hope to see it changed. Happy Chaos definitely needs to be nerfed if that happens, since that's about the only thing holding him back right now, but yeah, I don't know. I think it tributes to the state that the game is in, and if you look at what characters are good right now, like, for example, Ram is the only super top tier that isn't one of the highest health characters in the game, right? She's surrounded by Potemkin, Leo, Goldlewis, Johnny, like, Nago, all that, right? I think it is, like, super negatively impacting the game and think it needs to be tuned down, but people are probably not doing enough about it. That's about all I have to say for this time. Thanks for listening to me complain about meter for however long this video is. I do culture on Patreon if you want to check that out. If not, you know, like, subscribe, comment, all that, whatever. Thanks for watching.